When I got to my parents' house that evening, I already felt like I was walking into something thick and unspoken. The air was overly warm, the lights too bright, and the smell of roasted chicken, my brother's favorite, coated everything like old wallpaper. I sat at the table across from Jonah, my younger brother by 3 years. He was still in his tailored navy jacket, hair styled like he'd stepped off the cover of an alumni magazine. He tapped away on his phone, only looking up when Dad walked in, carrying a bottle of Pinot Noir that was clearly not from the grocery shelf. "Figured we'd open something nice," Dad said, nudging Jonah's shoulder like they were old business partners. "Harvard's done you well," Mom added as she passed Jonah a plate already filled more generously than mine. I hadn't even put my purse down. There was no birthday, no anniversary, just an unspoken celebration of Jonah. I watched them all smile around him like candles around a cake, and I swallowed a small ache that had followed me for years but never learned to scream. They talked about Jonah's upcoming job, something in consulting, something prestigious. Jonah corrected Dad on the title. "No, it's not associate, it's senior strategy analyst, Dad. Starting salary's $190. Oh, Mom's eyes lit up. Well, worth it then. Every penny we poured in. It was the casualness of it. Every penny we poured in. I pushed my salad around. "What do you mean we?" Dad was already lifting his glass. "Your college fund. We couldn't let Jonah turn down Harvard, could we?" I froze, not because I didn't suspect it, but because no one had ever said it out loud. They'd always kept it vague, said there was less money than they'd hoped when I was applying to schools, that financial realities had shifted, that community college was a smart start. I worked nights while going to classes, then took a job right after graduation to pay off the loans I didn't think I was supposed to have. And now, with one sentence and a raised glass, my family confirmed it. They'd stolen my education and handed it to Jonah like a legacy trophy. "I didn't know that was even legal," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic," Mom waved a hand. "The fund was in our name, we used it for the family. And look," she gestured at Jonah. "It worked out beautifully." Jonah finally looked up. "Relax, Maya, you still got a degree. Nobody said you had to struggle." I stood up. I hadn't even touched my food. Nobody followed me when I left. I think that hurt more than anything. I got in my car and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before turning the key. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror and realized I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was done. Done pretending I didn't know what they'd done. Done pretending I wasn't supposed to be more than just the family's safety net. My name is Maya Lane. I'm 31 years old, and I live a quiet life in a quiet building just outside Seattle. I work as a senior accountant at a mid-sized software firm, nothing flashy, but it's stable, and it's mine. I don't post much online. I'm not the type people remember at weddings or call for holiday plans. I don't sparkle at dinner tables or lead group texts. But I remember everything. I remember being 12, sitting in the back seat of a family minivan with a blue spiral notebook pressed to my chest, full of ideas for college. UCLA, maybe Northwestern. I remember my mom turning down the radio to ask Jonah if he wanted pizza or Chinese. He was 9. He said Chinese, and that was that. I wrote in all caps, "I want to study finance in California." No one asked what I was writing. I remember sophomore year of high school when I got a 4.0, and Dad didn't say anything. But Jonah got a most improved in baseball, and they threw him a backyard barbecue. There was a shift, subtle at first, like furniture rearranged slightly each week until you woke up in a different house. By the time Jonah was in high school, my parents had stopped asking about my classes entirely. It was all SAT prep for Jonah, campus visits, Ivy League brochures stacked on the kitchen counter like holy books. I applied to 6 colleges. I got into 4. I asked Dad if we could tour any. He sighed and said money was tight that year. "Apply for FAFSA," he said. "It builds character." Mom called it bootstrap thinking. I went to a state college an hour away and took the bus every weekend to work shifts at a grocery store. I took notes on spreadsheets between customers, practiced tax forms during lunch breaks. Meanwhile, Jonah flew to Boston, bought monogrammed sheets for his dorm, sent back photos of latte art and ivy-covered walls. The week I graduated, early, with debt and a job lined up, Jonah got a new car to help with his internship commute. Mom called me practical. Dad said I was the dependable one. At the time, I thought it was love in its own way. But love doesn't erase you. Love doesn't spend what was set aside for you and call it a family decision. They used to keep the trust paperwork in a green binder at the back of the hallway closet, the one with old tax documents and appliance manuals. I remembered it because I once filed it for Dad, thinking I was being helpful. The next weekend after the dinner, I visited while they were out at Jonah's graduation brunch. I said I was checking in on their cat. The binder was still there. Inside, I found the college fund documents, Maya Education Trust, opened in my name when I was 11. I flipped pages, annual contributions, bank signatories. And then, something that stopped me cold. Disbursement authorization. 2015, Jonah Lane. Purpose: Harvard enrollment deposit. The ink was sharp, digital. The signatures, both my parents'. I hadn't known this paper existed. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even been told. They'd siphoned my name into Jonah's future, like I was just a placeholder. I closed the binder with shaking hands. Something fell out. A receipt. A wire transfer for $83,000. $83,000. That wasn't a little shift in plans. That was everything I could have had. Everything I could have built without debt. Everything I lost. I didn't cry. Not then. I just took a photo of the page and the receipt. I returned the binder to its exact spot. Back home, I sat with my laptop and stared at my bank screen. Then I opened a new tab. I searched the name of the bank on the trust documents. Then I called. "Hi, I need to speak to someone in account auditing." The woman on the other end asked if I was calling about a fraud concern. I said, yes. The voice in me wasn't trembling anymore. It was flat, determined. She transferred me. When the next voice answered, I said, "My name is Maya Lane. I believe my education trust was misappropriated without my knowledge or consent. I have supporting documentation." The line went quiet for just a moment. Then she said, "Okay, let's open an investigation." That was the day I stopped waiting to be acknowledged. I didn't tell anyone I'd filed the claim. Not Jonah, not my parents, not even Allison. My closest friend from work, who once lent me $400 for textbooks during my final semester without asking for it back. I wanted it to stay quiet, clean, like a scalpel to the tissue instead of a chainsaw through bone. The woman from the bank, Michelle, called back 4 days later. She had the calm, practiced voice of someone who'd seen a lot of ugly things papered over in family finances. "Miss Lane," she began, "we've reviewed the documents you submitted and retrieved the original trust paperwork from our archives. The fund was established solely in your name, with your social security number, and with explicit language that it was non-transferable without beneficiary consent." I leaned against my kitchen counter. The floor felt slippery, though it wasn't. Michelle paused. "There's no record of you signing or authorizing any of the disbursements made in 2015 or 2016. Can you reverse them?" I asked. She sighed. "That's complicated. The money is gone, but given the evidence, we're obligated to flag this as a breach of fiduciary responsibility by the original account holders. There may be legal recourse." I didn't want to sue my parents, not then. I just wanted them to see. I thanked Michelle, hung up, and spent the next few nights gathering paperwork. I ordered official copies of the account history. I had to pay a $95 processing fee, which felt like the universe's cruel little joke. I started drafting a letter, not for court, but for clarity. 3 pages, typed, double-spaced. "You used my name to open a door and locked me out of it. You did not ask. You did not inform. You decided. And you watched me drown while you clapped for Jonah." I attached copies of the trust, the wire receipt, and the disbursement form. Then I printed them all and slipped them into a plain envelope with a yellow post-it note stuck to the front. "Please read before we meet." I waited until Jonah's graduation weekend. They were having a brunch at a waterfront hotel, one of those glassy beige buildings with valet service and a buffet too expensive to be tasty. I called ahead and booked a table for one, under my name, 10 minutes before theirs. I sat alone, ordered tea, and watched the ocean pretend to be calm through the tall windows. My envelope sat next to my mug. At 10:12, I saw them arrive. Jonah in a sharp blue suit, Mom in a shawl I hadn't seen before, Dad with his phone out, probably updating Facebook about their proudest moment yet. I stood, walked toward them before they spotted me. "Hey," I said. They all blinked like I'd stepped out of a fog. "Maya?" Mom asked. "What are you doing here?" "I have something for you," I said, handing her the envelope. "Please read it before we sit down." Dad glanced at it, annoyed. "Can this wait?" "No." Mom hesitated, then opened it. As she began reading, her fingers twitched the way they always did when she was caught in something, like she was trying to smooth invisible creases from her skin. Jonah looked over her shoulder, brows furrowed. "Is this about the trust?" he asked. "I told you." "You didn't tell me anything," I said, my voice low and even. "None of you did." Dad looked like he wanted to snatch the papers out of her hands. "Maya, this isn't the place." "I think it's exactly the place," I replied. "You threw this party to celebrate Jonah's future, the one you bought with my past." Other tables were beginning to glance over. I didn't care. "Where's your table?" I asked. "Let's go sit." Mom didn't move. "I'll make this very simple," I continued. You took $83,000 meant for me. I have documents proving you did it without consent. I filed a fraud report. The bank confirmed the breach. I haven't contacted legal counsel yet, but I'm considering it. Dad's face turned a color I'd never seen before, part shame, part rage. You'd sue your own parents? I met his eyes. You already did something worse. Jonas stood there, jaw tight. It was for the greater good, he muttered. I'm going to make 10 times that money. It's not like you were starving. I laughed, not out of humor, out of disbelief. You think this is about money? It's about what you taught me, that I don't matter, that I'm convenient, that my dreams were optional so yours could be inevitable. Mom finally spoke. We thought you'd understand. You were always so mature. Mature isn't the same as invisible. I stood, my hands were steady, my heartbeat wasn't. You can keep the brunch, I said, but I'm done keeping the peace. I turned and left, not because I was finished, but because I'd finally started. That night, I opened a new savings account, transferred everything I had into it. I called a lawyer 2 days later, not to sue yet, but to formally request a notarized apology and financial restitution acknowledgement. The lawyer sent the letter to their house. They didn't respond right away, but Jonah unfollowed me on every platform. That was confirmation enough. It took them 3 weeks to respond. No calls, no texts, no visit. Just a sterile 5-word email from my father. We need to talk, come Sunday. There was no salutation, no apology, just a summons as if I were being called in to explain my behavior. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I shut my laptop, brewed a cup of tea, and let it go cold on the counter. It was their pattern. Delay, deflect, deny, until the heat passed. They'd done this all my life, convinced that if they waited long enough, my silence would return like some loyal, obedient child. But this time, I wasn't returning as a daughter. I was returning as a witness. On Sunday, I wore dark jeans, a plain black turtleneck, and a coat that hit just below the knee. No makeup, no earrings. I didn't want to dress for comfort or distraction. I wanted them to see me, not a softened version. Their house hadn't changed. The same ceramic owl sat by the front door, the same porch light with a flickering bulb. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon floor cleaner and old upholstery. Jonah wasn't there, of course. I imagined he'd decided he was above all this. Or maybe he was busy boarding a flight for some consulting job he landed on the back of my stolen tuition. Mom was in the kitchen, moving dishes around that didn't need moving. When she saw me, she gave a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad was already at the dining table, arms crossed over his chest, his reading glasses perched halfway down his nose. On the table were a few sheets of paper and a yellow legal pad. Beside it, a half-empty glass of water. We read the lawyer's letter, Mom began as I sat. It was harsh. I asked for an apology and acknowledgement, I said. That's not harsh. That's me trying not to escalate this further. Dad leaned forward. You have to understand. We didn't know how to split things equally. Harvard isn't cheap. You didn't split anything. My voice was even. You stole it. That fund was mine. We never thought of it that way, Mom said quickly. It was all in the family, Maya. What benefits one of us was decided by 2 of you. I cut her off. Without the one it actually affected. Dad's mouth tightened. You weren't going to use the full amount anyway. You went to state. I blinked slowly. Because you told me we couldn't afford anything else. You told me it was either that or community college. He looked away. That landed. We were doing what we thought was best. Mom tried again, her voice higher. Jonah had this opportunity. He got into Harvard, Maya. It's not every day that you get to sabotage one child's future to inflate the other's ego. She froze. I leaned in, quietly now. You didn't just reroute money. You rerouted faith, in me, in what I could have done. You made sure Jonah succeeded, even if it broke me. And it did break me, quietly, privately, over years, and you didn't even notice. Dad was tapping his pen now. A tic he had when he didn't know how to argue back. I can't go back and fix what happened, Mom whispered. But Jonah's thriving. Isn't that a good thing? My mouth curled at the corner, not quite a smile. Good for who? She looked genuinely confused. For you. Because now you get to brag about having a Harvard son while pretending your daughter's ambition didn't get swallowed by your convenience? Dad finally spoke again. You're making this uglier than it needs to be. I'm naming what you've refused to say, I answered. And that's only ugly if you believe you're entitled to silence. I pulled a document from my folder and laid it flat on the table. This is a copy of the trust clause, non-transferable without my signature. You forged around it, and now you want to pretend it was a misunderstanding. They both stared at the paper. Mom's hands were shaking. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm not asking you to pay me back. I know you don't have it, but you're going to do something else. Mom looked up. What? You're going to write a statement and send it to the entire extended family. Clara, Vince, that ridiculous family group chat with the endless memes. You're going to tell the truth. That you took my college fund without my consent, and that you regret it. Mom's face collapsed. You want to humiliate us? I shook my head. I want to stop hiding. I want people to stop looking at me like the child who underachieved because she didn't try. I want Jonah's golden glow to stop casting a shadow over my whole goddamn life. Dad crossed his arms. What if we refuse? I met his eyes. Calm, tired. Then I escalate it. I go public. I take it to court, and I cut all contact. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. Mom picked up the document, read it. Her lips moved as she scanned the lines. We, Michael and Deborah Lane, acknowledge that we redirected funds from Maya Lane's education trust to pay for Jonah Lane's Harvard tuition without her knowledge or consent. We now recognize this action was unfair and harmful, and we deeply regret it. She looked at me. And this will be enough? It's a start, Dad nodded once. Sharp, fine, we'll send it. I stood, gathered my folder, slipped it into my bag. As I turned to go, Mom asked quietly, Do you still think of us as your parents? I paused. I think of you as people I used to look up to, I said. Now I think of you as people I survived. And I walked out the front door without looking back. The email went out 3 days later. I didn't see it firsthand, but I knew the moment it hit inboxes. It moved like a pulse through the extended family. My cousin Valerie was the first to respond. Holy crap, Maya, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Then at Clara, I always wondered why you disappeared after college. I see now that you didn't. Even Uncle Vince, who usually only texted about fantasy football, sent a one-line message. Took guts. You've got mine. That one made me cry. Not because of the words, but because it was the first time someone in this family saw me without me having to hand them a flashlight. It was strange, watching my name re-enter the family lexicon. This time not as the dependable one, the silent achiever, the leftover girl, but as the wronged party. I didn't post about it. I didn't explain. I let their words travel without interference. The apology email had gone out exactly as I wrote it. Short, unvarnished, no loopholes. We, Michael and Deborah Lane, acknowledge that we redirected funds from Maya Lane's education trust to pay for Jonah Lane's Harvard tuition without her knowledge or consent. We now recognize this action was unfair and harmful, and we deeply regret it. No excuses, no softened language. It ended with their names typed beneath, bare. It was the closest they'd ever come to telling the truth publicly. For a few days, I waited for the rest of the fallout. Jonah's rebuttal, maybe. Some kind of damage control. But nothing came. Just a notification from LinkedIn a week later. Jonah Lane has updated his job status. No longer at McKinsey & Co. I clicked through. His entire profile had been wiped clean except for a vague placeholder. Exploring new opportunities, passionate about transformation. Then the podcast started. 6 episodes. All titled with phrases like, the myth of the traditional path, rewriting your own legacy, and when your family doesn't get it. It was his voice. Smooth, rehearsed, deeply unaware. He never said my name, but I heard myself in every veiled jab, every smug anecdote, every story about resilience told by the man who never had to build anything without scaffolding. The podcast fizzled after 2 months, too niche, too self-congratulatory, too empty. Eventually, Jonah moved back home. I didn't hear it from my parents. I saw it in the background of a Facebook photo my mother posted, a blurry image of a birthday cake with Jonah standing just out of focus at the kitchen counter, holding the same chipped mug I used to drink cocoa from when I was a kid. Something about that moment struck me harder than the dinner. Not because he was there, but because he had returned to the house like nothing ever happened. Like nothing had cost anyone anything. Time passed. I got promoted. I bought a small 2-bedroom condo near the lake. Nothing dramatic, just quiet and clean and wholly mine. I filled it with succulents and used books and a blue couch I didn't have to share. I traveled, nothing grand, just local train rides, cheap hotels, places where no one knew who I was. And then one morning, the phone rang. It was Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something in me needed to hear her voice, if only to know it still trembled under pressure. We're thinking of selling the house, she said. Her voice was careful, like she was trying not to step on something brittle. It's a lot to maintain, and Jonah's not doing so well. I waited. He's been angry, she said after a pause. Blaming us, says we ruined his life with pressure, that we set him up to fail. He's been resentful. I didn't laugh. I didn't sigh. I said nothing. We thought, she continued, maybe you could talk to him. He might listen to you. You've always had a way of calming him. I bit the inside of my cheek. You want me to help the man you chose over me? She didn't respond right away. It wasn't that simple, she finally said. We didn't mean to pick sides. We just... You did, I interrupted softly. You picked. And now that your favorite broke, you're circling back to the sphere. Maya, that's not fair. What's not fair is that I lived a decade of hard choices because you made one without asking me. You watched me scrape by, and you called it character building. You fed Jonah my future and called it a family decision. There was silence on the other end. Then she whispered, "We didn't think it would turn out like this." "No," I said. "You thought I'd stay quiet." More silence. Then, "We just want our family whole again." I almost laughed. But it didn't feel funny. It felt sad. "You'll have to live with the cracks," I said, "because I'm not here to patch what you broke." She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just said, "Okay," and we hung up. Weeks later, while cleaning out a box from my childhood, I found something small wedged between two dusty books. A gold key. Tiny. Tied with a red ribbon. I remembered it immediately. It unlocked the metal lockbox I used to keep under my bed. Inside that box, when I was a child, were poems. Brochures for colleges I couldn't afford. Letters I never sent. Even my first rejection letter from Northwestern, folded so many times the paper had worn soft. The box was long gone, but the key had stayed. I stared at it in my palm. Back then, I thought it meant hope, possibility. The belief that someday someone would open the door for me. Now I see it differently. It's not a key to something. It's a reminder that I don't need someone else's permission to open anything ever again. Not a lock, not a future, not a voice. They thought I'd always stay quiet. But I'm louder now than they'll ever be. Some days, I wake up and forget it all happened. The trust, the transfer, the betrayal woven so quietly into my daily life that I thought I was the problem for feeling it. And then I pass the bookshelf where I keep the small gold key, now framed in a shadow box. No label, no explanation. Just a reminder that I was never crazy, never ungrateful, never wrong for wanting more than scraps from the table I helped set. I think about younger me sometimes. The version who smiled through dinner conversations about Jonah's internships while rationing groceries for finals week. The one who said, "I'm fine," so often she forgot what it felt like to not be. She didn't disappear, she grew, quietly, steadily, in places no one thought to water. The funny thing is, I don't hate them, not really. What they did was small and selfish, but it came from fear, not evil. Fear of not being enough, of one child failing, of the other surviving just fine without them. But I am not here to be the evidence that they made the right call. I'm here, that's enough. Forgiveness, if it comes, won't be a letter or a phone call or a dramatic Thanksgiving toast. It'll be the day I walk past their shadows and feel nothing tighten in my chest. It'll be peace, not granted, but grown, earned. And on that day, I won't need their approval, or their recognition, or their regret. Because I'll already have what they couldn't give me. Myself, and I am whole.